We all know that our ancient ancestors used to sacrifice people. Some chilling practices, like the Aztec removal of a victim's heart, are still pretty infamous today. But believe it or not, this barely scratches the surface of the gruesome rituals our ancestors used to perform. Over the past few years, archaeologists have unearthed sites so disturbing they give Flavio Biondo a chill. So, if you have a heart of steel, stay tuned as we explore the top 15 creepiest archaeological sites. Number 15, a holy yet cursed medieval well in England. St. Anne's Well, nestled between Rainhill and Sutton St. Helens near Liverpool, was once a sacred site where medieval pilgrims sought healing for their ailments. The well, dedicated to St. Anne, mother of the Virgin Mary, was believed to possess miraculous properties, supposedly because St. Anne herself had bathed in its waters. For centuries, the faithful came here, desperate for cures. But the well's history is stained with something darker, a curse that doomed those who wronged the church. The trouble began when Hugh Darcy, the steward of a nearby landowner, clashed with Father Delwaney, a prior who controlled access to the well. Soon after, the monks were expelled, and as they passed the well, the furious prior cursed Darcy. The curse of the serpent be on thee. The aftermath. Darcy's son died mysteriously, his fortunes crumbled, and one night, his head was found crushed by the well, just as the curse foretold. The holy waters may have healed some, but for others, they only delivered doom. Number 14, fairy rings and fairy forts. In Ireland, there's one rule you don't break: never mess with fairy forts. These ancient circular earthworks dating back to the Iron Age were once settlements. But as time passed, their purpose faded from memory, and locals came to believe they were homes of the fairies, places where supernatural forces lurked. To disturb them was to invite disaster. The legends say fairies guard hidden gold, and leprechauns trick those who trespass. But fairy mischief is the least of your worries. Farmers who dared plow through these forts found their livestock mysteriously dying. People who destroyed them reported family tragedies, financial ruin, and even death. It's not just ancient superstition either. In 2011, billionaire developer Sean Quinn, Ireland's richest man, suffered a financial catastrophe after disturbing an ancient tomb for a quarry project. So, coincidence? Many believe the fairy curse still holds power, proving that some ancient sites demand respect or retribution. Number 13, a city Jesus cursed. Chorazin wasn't just any ancient city. It was one of the three places Jesus himself allegedly cursed. Along with Bethsaida and Capernaum, Chorazin saw many of Jesus' miracles, yet according to the Gospels, its people remained unrepentant. For their defiance, Jesus delivered a divine warning: "Woe to you, Chorazin!" And sure enough, the city fell into ruin. By the 3rd century AD, Chorazin was completely abandoned, and by 330 AD, historian Eusebius claimed the site had been destroyed by an earthquake, proof, some believed, of Jesus' curse coming true. Yet, there's a twist. No archaeological evidence places Chorazin in the 1st century AD when Jesus supposedly lived. Did the city exist at all during his time, or did legend rewrite history? The ruins still stand in modern-day Khirbet Karaza, a crumbling reminder of a curse that may, or may not, have been real. Whether divine wrath or coincidence, Chorazin remains a ghost of a city that defied a prophet. Number 12, the ghost city of Bhangar. Bhangar Fort in Rajasthan, India, isn't just an abandoned ruin. It's considered the most haunted place in the country. The Archaeological Survey of India has banned visitors after sunset, and locals have moved away, unwilling to risk the wrath of its legendary curse. The town was founded in 1573, but by 1783, it was completely deserted. Two curses are blamed. The first came from Baba Balnath, a holy man who allowed the fort's construction, on one condition: no building should cast a shadow over his retreat. When a later prince violated this, legend says the city was doomed. The second story is even darker. A wizard named Singhia fell in love with Princess Ratnavati and attempted to bewitch her using a magic potion. But the princess saw through his trick and killed him. With his dying breath, Singhia cursed Bhangar, ensuring its ruin. Whether magic or misfortune, Bhangar fell, and to this day, no one dares to live within its walls. Number 11. A pit of severed hands from ancient Egypt. Speaking of severed hands, in 2012, researchers unearthed something creepy that pushed archaeology straight into horror movie territory. While digging through the ruins of an ancient Egyptian palace, they uncovered 4 pits, each looking like a scene from a Saw sequel. Inside, buried beneath layers of earth, lay something disturbing: a collection of human hands. There were 16 in total. Each one was a right hand. Each was large. Each was male. The find was gruesome, not just because of what it was, but because there was no clear explanation. Who cut them off? And why? Then finally, a theory emerged. These were trophies of war taken from enemy soldiers. In ancient Egypt, a warrior's right hand symbolized his strength, his power. By cutting it off, the victors were stripping their enemies of their warrior identity. And as if the humiliation wasn't enough, these severed hands were turned in for gold, proof of a kill, rewarded in cold, hard cash. This wasn't just a ritual. It was a brutal business. We mean, how can they do that? Number 10. Mass female sacrifice in ancient China. When we think of ancient China, we imagine towering pagodas, silk-robed emperors, and intricate traditions. Human sacrifice? Well, not so much. But at the Shimao ruins in Shanxi province, archaeologists uncovered a reality far darker than any myth. Their discovery? 80 female skulls were deliberately placed in the foundations of the city walls. These weren't ordinary burials. The evidence suggests they were part of a massive sacrificial ritual, their deaths marking the beginning of Shimao's construction some 4,300 years ago. The unsettling part? China was already an advanced civilization. The much mythologized Xia dynasty was thriving, while much of Europe was still made up of scattered tribes living in huts. Yet here, human sacrifice was still very much alive. Women slaughtered and repurposed as literal building materials. It's a chilling reminder that progress doesn't always mean mercy. Even in one of the most sophisticated civilizations of its time, blood was still the price of power. Chinese. Number 9. Dismemberment in Bronze Age. England. An obscure corner of Kent, England, isn't the kind of place you'd expect to find something truly nightmarish. But in 2013, archaeologists uncovered a scene so grim it felt straight out of Hannibal. Yup, really. Beneath the soil of a remote farm in Thanet, they found an ancient sacrificial pit, one filled with dismembered human remains jumbled together with animal carcasses. One man was discovered stuffed into a sack, his body tangled with a cow's foot. Nearby, 2 children had been chopped into pieces, their remains grotesquely mixed with a cow's head. Slaughtered lambs were strewn throughout the pit, their bones scattered among human fragments. Why did this happen? No one knows for sure. Was it a desperate offering to the gods? A ritual purification? Some unknown ancient horror? The mystery only makes it worse. One thing's for sure. These weren't ordinary burials. This was something far darker. Number 8. A Minoan skull-shattering sacrifice. If you thought the Thanet pit was unsettling, wait until you hear about what archaeologists found in Crete. At the ancient Minoan site of Kydonia, they unearthed the remains of a young girl. But this wasn't just any burial. Her skull had been brutally shattered, fragments of bone flung around her like a violent afterthought. And she wasn't alone. Her body had been thrown into a pit filled with animal remains, all of which bore the same fatal head trauma. Was this a sacrifice? A twisted ritual? The signs point to yes. Local legend speaks of Eulemene, a virgin sacrificed to honor ancient heroes. Could this be her? We may never know for sure. But what's certain is this: her death was no accident. It was deliberate, violent, and ritualistic. And now, thousands of years later, she's still making us question just how civilized our ancient ancestors really were. Number 7. The Midnight Terror Cave. When something is literally called the Midnight Terror Cave, you know it's going to be horrifying. This Mayan cave in Belize lives up to its name. Discovered by accident when a looter fell in, the cave revealed thousands of human bones, many of them belonging to children who were brutally sacrificed. The bones showed clear evidence of ritual killings, cut marks, blunt force trauma, and traces of a blue pigment the Mayans used during offerings to their gods. But the horror doesn't stop there. At least a quarter of the remains belonged to children, some of whom had been brought from over 200 miles away. In the 9th century, that kind of distance suggests something truly sinister, a large-scale human trafficking network that existed purely to supply Mayan temples with sacrifices. If true, that means the Midnight Terror Cave wasn't just a place of death. It was a central hub for an entire industry of human sacrifice. Number 6. The South Korean man buried with his noblewoman. There was a time when dying meant you might not go alone. Your servants, warriors, and even lovers could be buried with you. That dark reality resurfaced in South Korea when archaeologists discovered the remains of a noblewoman buried alongside a man. But here's the unsettling part. He wasn't a noble. Unlike her, he had no personal artifacts, no status symbols, nothing to indicate he was important. That meant one thing: he was a sacrifice. But why? One theory suggests he was a loyal servant, chosen, or forced, to accompany her in the afterlife. Another far grimmer possibility? He was her lover. If true, that raises terrifying questions. Did he willingly die to be with her? Or did her family decide for him? Imagine knowing that the moment your lover dies, your fate is sealed too. Ancient romance? More like an eternal death sentence. Number 5. Mesa Verde. Mesa Verde was once a thriving Puebloan city, with 6,000 residents living in elaborate cliffside dwellings. They farmed, hunted, and built one of the most iconic civilizations of North America. But by 1277 AD, everything started falling apart. A 23-year drought devastated crops, and by 1300 AD, Mesa Verde was abandoned. But this wasn't just a case of people quietly packing up and leaving. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of brutal conflict, decapitated bodies, charred skeletons, and signs of violent massacres. The society didn't just collapse, it self-destructed in bloodshed. According to anthropologist Scott Ortman, about 30% of the population lived on land that couldn't sustain crops. Starvation led to desperation, which led to war. The very people who once thrived in this canyon turned on each other. Some theories even suggest cannibalism played a role. Mesa Verde wasn't just abandoned, it was a city torn apart by its own people. Number 4. Egypt's Valley of the Kings. By day, the Valley of the Kings in Egypt is a breathtaking archaeological wonder, home to over 60 tombs of ancient pharaohs, including Ramses III, Seti I, and King Tutankhamun. But by night, it's one of the most haunted places on Earth. Legends tell of a ghostly chariot racing through the desert, led by fiery horses, believed to be the spirit of King Tut himself. Visitors and archaeologists alike have reported hearing screams, whispers, and footsteps echoing through the tombs. The valley has long been linked to a deadly curse, dating back to the 1922 excavation of King Tut's tomb. Many involved in the dig, including the expedition's funder, suffered strange accidents, financial ruin, or death. Skeptics dismiss these as coincidences, but the eerie experiences continue. Whether ancient spirits guard their tombs or the power of belief fuels the fear, one thing is certain. The Valley of the Kings is more than just a burial site. Number 3. Paris Catacombs. It's not an archaeological site, but it is scary. Beneath the romantic streets of Paris lies something far less charming, the remains of over 6 million people. The Paris Catacombs, created in the 18th century, were meant to solve the city's overflowing cemeteries. Instead, they became one of the most haunted places in Europe. Tourists wander through miles of bone-lined tunnels, some just for the thrill, others out of morbid curiosity. But the deeper you go, the stranger it gets. In the 1990s, a group of explorers found an abandoned video camera deep within the catacombs. The footage showed a man wandering the tunnels, panicking as he lost his way before the video cut off abruptly. No one knows what happened to him. Adding to the horror, legend says that after midnight, the walls begin to whisper, luring the lost further into the maze, until they become just another part of the catacombs' grim collection. Number 2. Pompeii. Pompeii isn't just a city frozen in time, it's a graveyard of thousands, preserved by the volcanic wrath of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. Visitors describe an eerie feeling, as if the streets aren't empty, just waiting. Some even say Pompeii is cursed. Over the years, hundreds of tourists have stolen artifacts, only to mail them back later, blaming horrible misfortunes on their stolen relics. Coincidence or a lingering curse? If that wasn't disturbing enough, researchers made a gruesome discovery in Herculaneum, a nearby city destroyed in the same eruption, a victim whose brain had turned to glass. The extreme heat liquefied the brain, and as it cooled, it crystallized, preserving his neurons. Imagine if his final thoughts were still trapped in that glass-like tissue, a permanent record of his last terrifying moments. Pompeii's ruins may be silent, but its victims still have stories to tell, even if they have gone through hell. What a sad end. Number 1. Sunantunich. Deep in the jungles of Belize, the ancient Mayan city of Sunantunich still stands, but it's not abandoned. Visitors claim a ghostly woman in white appears near the temple, her red eyes glowing as she climbs the stone stairs, disappearing into the walls. The first sightings date back to the 19th century, when early explorers encountered the spirit. Some believe she was a human sacrifice, her spirit forever repeating her last walk up to the altar. Others think she's a Mayan noblewoman, doomed to haunt the ruins for eternity. Despite decades of exploration, no one has ever identified her. But the stories persist. Even modern tourists report chilling encounters. Whether it's a lost soul or just an eerie illusion, one thing is certain. Something still lingers at Sunantunich, watching from the shadows. If you've enjoyed watching this video, be sure to like, share, and smack that subscribe button. Thanks for your time, and we'll see you soon.